On this one, I take on Tamiya's 172nd F4U-1A Corsair with some great 3D decals. I tried a new fading technique, add some heavy weathering and chipping effects. Alright, here's the kit. It says it comes in 2 versions, but it actually comes in 3. The Jolly Rogers, Devil Dogs, and Black Sheep. I'm going to be doing the Devil Dogs for this one. I also picked up some 3D interior decals from Quinta Studios, and they're very, very nice. The kit also comes with 2 propellers and 2 different canopies for both versions, and I found the sprues to be nicely laid out and the fitment to be excellent. The decals were a little thick, but it's nothing you can't deal with. And the instructions are nicely laid out. Building the cockpit, in order to get ready for the 3D decals, you have to sand off the raised details that are already present. Just take your time there. Same for the side panels. Just got to flatten that out so it's ready for the decal. Starting with the first color here, I'm not going too heavy in order for the black primer to help me with some pre-shading. Inside of the cowl also needs the interior green color. As well as most of the cockpit, it's mostly just green and black, which makes it pretty easy. Going with the black detail now, most of the top surfaces will be covered by the decals, but I wanted to put it down anyway, just in case I had some fitment issues with them, but I did not, thankfully. However, it's always good to be safe. Good technique when you're doing these small raised areas, if you have color underneath, is just to angle your brush at an extreme angle to the part and let the brush just glide along the raised areas, and you should be able to paint some very fine detail without disturbing the color underneath. That's what I'm doing here. And this is the oxygen canister in the cockpit, and that gets painted yellow color. Most of this you can't really see, but I always like to put in these details just in case someone's looking. And even though we have some nice 3D decals, we still have to paint a few little spots here and there with some color. And then I'm going in with the weathering pencil. I just wanted some light rubbing effect on here, but you can go wild with this seat. I know they normally have a lot of chips and scratches on them. And it's always good to add a dark washed the inside of the cockpit to bring out all of the details. When you're going down in scale like this 172 scale plane, you want more contrast. The more the better, because at smaller scales it's harder to see the details of the model. When you're going up in scale, you don't have to go so heavy. The great thing about enamel washes is they come off with some thinner or white spirit, which I'm doing here. You want to take a good bit of it off, but again, you do want to have a lot of nice contrast on these parts so that they can be seen. Just starting the decals now, putting down some PVA glue. I went with PVA instead of CA glue, which the instructions tell you to do, because I just wanted that extra drying time and maneuverability, especially at this small scale. Let's look at the final result, and I just love the detail on these. Amazing at this small scale. I think it's much more than I can do with a brush, and I will definitely be using these in the future again. Bringing the two halves together, you just have to watch the control surface not to bend that. And I find the fitment was great. You could add CA glue to do this, but I just opted for some plastic cement for the extra drying time. It was a little fiddly, to be honest. And the fitment issue was excellent. I didn't have any problems putting everything together here. When gluing the two halves of the fuselage together, since we're using plastic glue, you want to give that a good 24 hours to dry before you attempt to remove the seam line. And just realizing I forgot to paint one of the metal parts, which will be seen from below the aircraft. Okay, and I drilled out the exhaust ports and had to drill 2 holes to fit on the bomb. Bringing the 2 wing halves together, I always like to tape the halves first before gluing. This allows you to hold onto the part much better and then avoids any separation. The plastic glue does take a moment to dry, so you don't want to have any misaligned pieces. putting it all together now, fit in fairly well. And I didn't need to add any filler to the bottom. I did run a little bit of filler along the wing edge on the top, but it wasn't too much. Okay, starting on the engine now. I did opt to use a brush for this rather than the airbrush, just because I wanted to put the whole engine together. And I find that the metallic colors go on really nicely with the brush. I added a bright green color to simulate the zinc chromate primer that the Corsairs used. I don't think you can see this part when the engine's on, but it's always good to put these details in. You do see the back, however, through the engine vents, since they are modeled in the open position. Adding another good layer of black enamel wash. This will just pick out all the little details in the engine. And just take off a good amount of it, the surface stuff, and leaves everything in the recesses. Putting together the engine now is the open vents. And the cowling goes on over top of that. Inside the engine there is a rubber grommet that the propeller sits in and allows the propeller to spin freely. Now, realizing that you can see that part of the engine when it is on the main body of the plane, I'm just going ahead and adding some primer to the inside of the vents, and then prepping it for color. It would be, if you didn't do this, it would be very hard to get your brush fully into that spot. So best to do it now. Just adding some Tamiya weathering pigment to the exhaust pipes. This pigment is very nice, goes on smooth, and comes with a makeup applicator. You can get more of these applicators at drugstores, and it's always good to have on hand for this type of work. Now we're detailing the back of the cockpit. This is the headrest for the pilot. Just doing a few little highlights here as well with some lighter brown. Now we have the full fuselage put together now, and starting to take shape. I just wanted to add a bit of primer here as well because the canopy is going to be sitting over top of that part and will be very difficult to paint once that piece is on. So best to do that now as well. After the primer, I just put some AK black on that piece. I used Silly Putty to mask the engine and the wheelbase. I thought it would work better than it did, but more on that later. Just going in now, there is a bit of a pad on the front of the cockpit, so just putting some brown detail there. Okay, finally starting to work on the main body of the plane. I'm just adding a little bit of light primer to the seam lines just to check if everything is good there. As I said before, the fitment of the plane was really good and I didn't really have many issues, just a few little spots that weren't sanded perfectly. When applying the primer, I try not to go full coverage on it. I like to leave a little bit of the gray from the plastic, add to the pre-shading. By not going too heavy, you won't clog up any of the details either. Now we're doing the main pre-shading with black. I'm just following along the panel line edges, and you don't really need to be too perfect here as long as it's around the panel lines. You can be fairly rough, just adds to the weathering effect. I think if you didn't want to go so heavily weathered, you can be a little bit more precise with this. See that scratch at the top, that's where the only place I had to do some extra sanding. Doing this pre-shading is also a great way of practicing your freehand airbrushing. I'm intentionally being a little rough here because I wanted this Corsair to look heavily weathered. A lot of these fighters, when they're the ground-based aircraft, were operating off of beaches in the Pacific, and they were exposed to a lot of salt air and sand, which didn't do well for the paint job. Starting in with the insignia white, it's important not to go too heavy. You want to build this up in light layers so that you don't ruin the pre-shading effect that we just put on. For all painting, it's better to go lighter than heavier. You can always build up, but it's very hard to remove if you put it on too thick. So I have some good coverage there, but you can clearly see that the pre-shading is still evident on the bottom. If anything, I probably went too heavy on the wingtips because now the blue color has to go over top. However, I'm adding it in very rough, blotchy patterns. This will give the paint some texture and add to that initial paint fading effect that we're going for. Okay, remember what I was talking about with the silly putty? What's happened is the paint does not stick to the silly putty at all, and it just got rubbed off, but also took a chunk of the insignia white off the bottom of the plane as well. So we're going to have to try to fix that as best as we can. I don't think I'll be using silly putty in the future to do some masking. I'll probably just stick to some foam and tape. On the edge, I started in on the three-tone camouflage, and I'm blocking out the bottom just to make a harder edge with some blue tack. So here we're just trying to fix that one spot with just putting some more white on it and just building it up slowly in layers. With the weathering effects and stuff that we're putting on, you won't be able to see that mistake. Here we see the first hard edge of the three-tone camouflage. I'm not really sure I'm liking that, but still decided to continue on just in case. You can always fix it later. Now we're masking out the bottom in order to get the top coat on. Just like the insignia white underside, I'm building the top color up very slowly so that I don't destroy the pre-shading. This paint is very thin, so it aids in helping me do that. Okay, here's a look at the three-tone camo. I didn't really like it too much, so I opted to do a little freehand blend over top of the hard edge, which I think looks much better. Of course, we can't forget the tail, which is the intermediate blue. Again, just blending in the hard edge camo here. I think it does look much better when it's blended in, and the overall effect when it's finished is much better. Alright, here we are so far with the base coats being done. As you see, both the bottom and the top, the pre-shading is still evident through the paint. And I like that it already looks a little faded. Putting on the decals now, I did varnish the entire plane in a satin varnish before I did this step. The decals were fairly thick, so I needed a lot of microsol and microsets in order to get them sitting flat on the plane. I tend to put on a good amount of softening solution, both to soften the decal and to allow the decal to float on top of the liquids to position it easier. Once I start taking off the liquid, the decal will start to set into the plastic. Be difficult to take off, but you still have to be careful not to nudge it. Then I put on microsol. Be fairly liberal with this, and I'm making sure just to do it in a one-way direction and not touch the decal after the microsol has gone on, because the decal gets very soft at that point and could rip or disform. Once the decal has fully dried, I find that you can continue to add additional layers of microsol to it in order to soften the decal even more. Now I'm trying a technique that's new to me in order to try to simulate some paint fade at the top of the aircraft. This is a 3-part Mediterranean blue to 1-part insignia white. And spraying it through the aquarium filter here just gives it some added texture rather than trying to dust the entire wing with that whiter mixture. It took a little bit of time to get used to, but as my confidence gained, I found that the effect got better. I think it turned out pretty nice, and the additional weathering we will be putting on this will add to the paint fade effect. I left the bottom untouched with that, typically because the bottoms of the aircraft aren't exposed to the sun as much. For the chipping effect, I opted to use a very fine brush in order to control it 100%. Find on these small scales, if you go too heavy on the chipping, it starts to look really unrealistic. I was using some good references and the box art for the kit in order to come up with the chipping pattern. I find it good to concentrate on one little piece at a time and continually step back and look at the entire model so that you're not overdoing the effect. So there we go, that's the final chipping effect that I'm happy with. I find I have to pull myself away from this, or else I could just spend all day doing that and overwhelming the model with tons of chipping. Since this is a heavy weathered model, I think that's the right balance, and from the references I saw, it seems to be fairly similar. From what I've seen, the pilots and the crew of the real airplane go up the right side more than the left, so I put more chipping and weathering on that side. Can't forget the propeller as well. This often had a good amount of chipping on it also. I'm using the weathering pencil through this project. I'm not really sure I'm liking it more than the paint, but it does have its place to add some rub effects to the model. Putting the wheels on the model now. I'm trying to be very careful so that I don't scratch the paint and put glue all over the model. It is a very tight fit, but it does go in eventually. Same for the tail wheel, that goes in a little bit easier. And surprisingly, the wheel bay doors goes on quite easy. Some great hinges there that it rests on. So I just needed a few dabs of super glue and held it up. We're putting on the bomb now. The holes I drilled earlier allow it to fit into place pretty easy without damaging the paint. Same with the wheels, they only fit one way, so it makes it easy to apply them. Right, I'm almost done with the model, but we need to add a little bit extra weathering just to take it to the next level and to increase the amount of detail that we see even more. First step is the overall panel line wash. These panel liners from AK go on really nice, and they come off easy with some thinner or white spirit. This wash is specifically made for blue or gray vehicles. I'm just taking off the majority of the panel line wash with some enamel thinner on a Q-tip. Trying to be fairly light with this. I have damaged models in the past by doing this step too hard, so just a little light touch never hurts anybody. Just going over a couple of times as well, just to smooth out everything. I'm also moving the Q-tip forward and back just to keep the dirt and grime the way that the air would flow across the wing. So here we see after the panel line wash, it adds so much more detail to the plane and really makes it look good. I had to add a little bit more dirt and grime from those exhaust ports on the bottom. We're putting in some oil paints here This is the oil brushers from MIG to simulate the soot that would have collected from the exhaust ports on the bottom of the plane. I'm just adding some oil paints here and pulling them out to how the exhaust would flow underneath the plane. The effect was pretty light the first time I did it, so I'm just going in again a little bit heavier this time. The beauty of using oil paints is that you can start heavy and remove as much as you wish. Okay, I'm happy with that. So next, to add to this effect, I'm putting on some black smoke pigment. This stuff is really strong, so you have to be careful of where you apply this because it is harder to take off than the oil paints. I'm applying it with a silicone brush. I find that the silicone brushes make it easy to initially blend the pigments. I'm going with a makeup sponge in order to smooth out the pigments even more. Just adding a little dust effect to the wheels and the wheelbase. I think if I was to do this again, I would have gone a little heavier with the pigment and may go back to the model at a later date. I did use Pigment Fixer to lock in the pigments, which did decrease the effect overall. If you don't use Pigment Fixer, I find that the effect is more natural, but the pigment is very fragile and can come off over time. And this is the pigment without any fixer added, which has a really good effect. When you put the pigment fixer on, it will lighten that significantly. Okay, we're on the home stretch now, just doing the final little pieces. These are the lights on the wings and the reflectors. So I always paint these a really bright silver and then go in with a transparent color to simulate the light. The silver underneath will continue to shine through the transparent color and give it a really cool effect. Can't forget the wingtip lights as well. On larger scales, these can be done to look like they have glass in them, but on this scale, just a little silver paint is all you need. So here we're using the transparent colors. I use Citadel contrast paints for this, which I find works really, really well. And just finishing off with some gloss varnish, just to make the lights really pop. Alright, moving into the canopy, I will start by coating the clear parts in Pledge floor gloss. This is an old trick that adds a lot of shine to the parts and will protect them as well. The floor gloss is just really an acrylic varnish that has a very, very high shine. You can also use this to gloss coat your model as well. I just dip it in and just shake off the excess and put it down on a piece of paper. I did move these to a piece of plastic later on so the part won't stick to the paper. And then after that I cover the parts with a clean cup just to avoid any dust or dirt getting onto the parts. After about 24 hours then I start masking the canopy, first with some tape just to outline it and then go in with some liquid mask. And then finally giving it a few coats once the liquid mask has a chance to dry. I always find that this part is both scary and satisfying at the same time. And there we have it. I think it turned out fairly well. And just adding the clear part to the bottom of the plane. I find it very interesting that these planes had that feature. I just stuck it down with some PVA glue, trying not to get anything on to the rest of the fuselage. And then going in with some very light touch of the panel liner. I don't want to get anything under the clear part at this point or over top of the glass. Moving on to securing the canopy, I'm just using some PVA glue. which the canopy will slot over. I'm going to model this in the open position so I can show off the inside of the cockpit. Then I'm adding the small pitot tubes on the wing. It's easy to forget these small parts, but they add a lot to the detail of the plane. And the instructions show that this version of the plane has 2 radio antennas, although some of the references I had showed that they only had 1, but I guess there's so many different versions of these planes flying around, you can sort of pick and choose which one you want. I'm also trying not to get any glue on any of the other surfaces. And finishing up with the antenna, I just stretched some sprue and then colored it with a Sharpie marker. I hope you like this one as much as I did, and if you want to help this channel grow, please like and subscribe or comment below. Take care.